Today we're going to go over NFL Week 9 predictions. So we're currently at, let's see, 19 and 21. So right around 500, a little bit below 500. But for NFL Week 9, we have Bears -2.5, Steelers underdog at home. I think they bounce back +3, Cowboys -3. This is the trend where the team loses by 20 plus points. They're coming back as a favorite, especially in prime time. They typically cover. Cowboys -3, Jags -3, Niners -2.5. Hopefully we can get around 500, even above 500. And again, my Super Bowl winner pick still Steelers. I know they're uh, consecutive losses, but it's still sticking with them um, for the Super Bowl. Now we'll go over. Now we'll go over some P2 concepts, specifically some B concepts. So first one is K10 checking the pulse austerities. This is all about Mukhtar Tami checks Maharaj if he has an illness. Maharaj does happen to have an illness and talks about how a wise person performs austerities by restraining their body and indriyas. A sadhu is wise, should also behave as such to deliberately induce suffering upon their body and indriyas. Sadhu should also maintain the following wish that I do not desire the pleasures of the Panch Vishays found in Devlok, Brahmalok, Vaikunt, and other realms. I wish to please God only by performing austerities. Only understanding God to be the all-doer is the supreme cause of liberation. No worse sinner than the person who does not realize God to be the all-doer because they realize God, Karma, and others to be the cause of everything and not God. Just in the same way that one shuns the company of a vile person, one shun the company of those people and persons and those shastras that refute the upasana of God and breaks one master relation, servant relationship with God. If the person who is offering bhakti to God with such lavish objects does so without any desires, solely for the purpose of earning God's pleasure, then it is all right. Then it is all right to offer such beautiful items and clothes and jewelries to please God. So if they're offering this as bhakti to God without any other desires and they're only doing it for the sole purpose of earning God's pleasure, then that is appropriate. But if they are tempted by those objects, viewing them to be God's prasad and leaving God aside, then and if they develop affection for those objects, then by indulging in the vishayas, they will become engrossed in them and corrupted. So that is what is inappropriate when we talk about pleasing Maharaj by all these different alluring items. Right? So a renunciate should only realize God to be the only doer, should strive to please God only by performing austerities, also worship God in the same way that Radhika ji and Lakshmi ji do, profound loving bhakti. And one's mind, one may have a great zeal to cultivate the virtue, but obstacles can happen. What should we do? Sri Maharaj says that a person who has great zeal in anything, in any endeavor, even if they were to face 1,000 obstacles, even if they were to face 1,000 obstacles, right, that person would not be hindered despite facing these obstacles. This talks about his experience that it's been 21 years since he first met Raman and Swami, and during that, in his entire life experience, he's uh, had and been offered countless of these various clothes items, jewelry, but his mind has never been tempted by any of these items because he has zeal only for renunciation. His zeal and principle is just like this. One should please God by performing austerities, realizing God to be the all-doer, offer bhakti to him while maintaining a master-servant relationship. K11 characteristic of affection. One characteristic of affection is one who has affection for their beloved God will never disobey the wishes of their beloved. That is the characteristics. An example of this is with the gopis who they had love for Krishna Bhagavan, but they realized that their wish was for Krishna Bhagavan to not be with the gopis. So when Krishna Bhagavan left, they did not force him to stay, right? Because it was not his wish to stay, and they realized his wish. And even though they were only felt 3 gaus away, the gopis never disobeyed his wishes by going for his darshan because they knew that by going for his darshan, it would be contrary to his wish, right? So one who has true affection for a person acts only according to their wishes. That is a characteristic of affection, right? And then now, if a person has deep affection for God and treats the worldly Panch Vishayas that are not related to God as insignificant, if they are firmly attached to God via the Panch Vishayas, then that devotee has a personal connection, rapport with God, right? Maintains a constant association. K12, tamarind seed, destroying the God and body, all about that we know that The three bodies of the Jiva are Stuksh, Sukshma, and Karan. Three bodies of Ishvara, Virat, Sutra, Ma, and Avekrut. Right? Karan body is the Maya of the Jiva in the same way that the skin of a seed of a tamarind seed is attached to the seed, right? Skin of a tamarind seed is extremely firmly attached to the seed. And only when that seed is roasted over a fire can easily peel the skin of the seed out, right? In the same way that Karan body, when the Karan body is roasted over by the meditation and words of God, it can easily be separated from the Jiva. The Jiva is the seed, the Karan body is the skin of the seed, and it can easily be roasted over, right? It could easily be roasted in the same way that you roast the seed over a fire. Right? The Jiva can be, the Karan body is roasted by meditation and the words of God, so it can easily be separated. And we know that the Kshetragna lies really close to the Antakaran. Kshetragna lies really close to the Antakaran, right? The Jiva, which is the Kshetragna, it lies very close to the Antakaran, and it is the Kshetragna that enlightens the 14 Indriyas. So whenever one hears something, that is only consolidated when one contemplates it in the Antakaran, because the Antakaran is very close to the Kshetragna. The Kshetragna empowers all of the 14 Indriyas. Right? And then Maharaj talks about how if a person with such a strong teeth were to such strong teeth can even eat raw chana, were to eat a few sour mangoes, he would not be able to chew even boiled rice. The same way a person was overpowered by all of these different vishayas, all of these different lust, anger, and other faults. If he were to listen to these discourses with faith and persistence, then they would be no longer indulging in those punch vishayas. So listen to the discourses of PN with faith and love. No better method to stabilize the mind and to free it of desires for the vishayas. G22, small streamlet of water. G22, small streamlet of water. In this body resides the Jiva and the Indriyas and the Antakaran. They have been attached to the Jiva. They have also been attached externally to the Panch Vishayas. But the Jiva thinks that these Indriyas and the Antakaran to be their own form, but they are not their own form, right? It is due to the ignorance. It is due to the ignorance that the Jiva believes the Indriyas and the Antakaran to be their own form. The Vishayas are also distinct from the Antakaran, but they, due to constant association with them, they have appeared to be one with the Antakaran. And the desire to indulge in the Vishayas comes not internally, not from the Antakaran, but it is from the external Indriyas. Okay, so analogy of extreme heat or cold first comes into contact with the outer Indriyas and then enters the body via those Indriyas. It is not generated from within, it is generated from the outside, then enters within. Right, so the desires for the Panch Vishayas are not initially generated, they come from the outside, right? Must come into contact with the Vishayas externally, and then those Vishayas pervade the Antakaran. Okay, so a boil, in the same way, now another analogy, boil develops externally on the skin, right? Can only be cured if you apply medication externally. So right. So the desire for indulging in the Panch Vishayas comes externally through the Indriyas. Right? Now, what is the method of applying that medication? Right? What is the method of applying that medication? Well, eradicating that attachment to the Vishayas is abstaining from touching objects like women and other alluring objects via the skin, not looking at their beauty via the eyes, nor talk about them using the tongue, not listen to them or about them via the ears, not smell their fragrance through their nose. Right? So if controlling those external Vishayas, you force the or external Indriyas, by having control over those external Indriyas, the external Vishayas cannot pervade the Antakaran. In the same way, a stomach illness can only be cured when medicine enters the stomach. All of the Vishayas that have already been accumulated in the Antakaran should be eradicated by the following thought. So stomach illness can only be cured when medicine enters the stomach. How can we cure when all of these Vishayas have pervaded the Antakaran? Well, that is by thinking that I am the Atma, and the Indriyas have no relation. They have no relation. And one should behold God's form in their Chaitanya and should remain fulfilled. Take the example of a well that is completely filled with water. The water in the well will prevent the flow of new water from coming in. So remain fulfilled externally obstruct the inflow of Vishays through the Indriyas and remain fulfilled through the bliss of one's Atma, one should remain fulfilled from within. 2-7, poor man. Pretty straightforward. The reason for a person not being able to overcome their swabhavs and despite them still having resolve to not have a single swabhav, the reason for this is the deficiency in Vairagya. Even if they have sure that they eradicate their swabhavs, it is due to the deficiency of Vairagya. For example, a poor man may have the intense desire, may have the intense resolve for lots of sumptuous food and lavish clothes, but how is it possible for him to acquire? How is that possible? So one who lacks Vairagya, one who has a deficiency of Vairagya, even though they have Shraddha, though they have firm resolve, they are not able to overcome those swabhavs. And so, what is the solution for this? If they lack Vairagya, what is the solution for this? Intensely serve a great sadhu, obediently persevere in their observance of the injunctions of God. Then God will look upon them with grace, eye of compassion, and their vicious natures will be eradicated. So when they have been eradicated, it can only be have said to have been eradicated by the grace of God. G211, all karma is becoming a form of bhakti. So many people think that they only deal with dharma, arth, kam, right? Many people think that they only deal with dharma, arth, and kam. And those people who think that they only deal with dharma and kam, dharma, arth, kam, they enjoy the fruits of those karmas in Devlok, Brahmlok, and Mrityulok, right? So pious karmas that a person performs while harboring a desire for dharma, arth, and kam, those become sattvic, rajasic, and tamasic. Right? So they're only enjoyed in Devlok, Brahmlok, Mrityulok, but if and not attain the gunadita abode of God. But if a person abandons the desire for the fruits related to dharma, arth, and kam, and only performs the pious karmas only to please God, then those pious karmas become a form of bhakti and aid in the attainment of liberation. And there's a vast difference between the activities of a devotee of God and the activities of a non-believer. While all the activities of a non-believer are for pampering their indriyas, all activities of a devotee of God are solely for serving God and his devotees. That is the difference between a devotee of God and the activities of a non-believer. And if a person sees non-karma in the karmas performed by devotees of God for the purpose of pleasing God, and they see a non-believer who has adopted the path of nivrutti as drowned in karmas, so a person sees non-karma in the karmas performed by a person who does karmas for the purpose of pleasing God, so that is non-karma, and they see a non-believer who has adopted the path of nivrutti as someone who is drowned in karmas, then that is said to be the most intelligent of all people. Right? And if a person perceives a flaw in the devotee of God who by God's command performs karmas for the purpose of pleasing God, then adharma resides in his heart, will reside in his heart. G212, art of ruling. The Jeev thinks that lust, anger, and other vicious natures have been attached to my Jeev in this manner, depending on which of lust, anger, greed, or other vicious natures predominant in a person. One may believe that Jeev is full of that nature due to one's association with it. So the Jeev feels like lust, anger, and vicious natures are attached to my Jeev. It is literally attached to my Jeev. But one who wants to attain a certain state of enlightenment should make an effort and should not relax or lose courage. They should think that one should not think I am insignificant and the antkarans and indriyas are strong. Right? One should think that I am the Jivatma. I reside in this body. I'm greater than all of them, and I am their controller. I'm the controller of the Indriyas. I'm controller of the Antakaras. They do not control me. And in the same way, if a king were to possess little or no intelligence, other members of the family, other members in the village would not obey his orders, no matter what. Right? So the king symbolizes the Jeev. Members of the household symbolizes the Antakaran. People of the village and kingdom symbolize the Indriya. So if the Jeev becomes discouraged, the king becomes discouraged, relaxes his authority, right? Then in the same way the subjects don't listen, in the same way the members of the family don't listen, right? The Indriyas and the Antakaran will also not listen. So the king becomes helpless like the beggar. The Jeev also becomes helpless like a beggar. So king becomes discouraged. His subjects who live with him assume power, don't allow him to exhibit any authority. Same thing happens with the Jeev. Right? So you want to force the Indriyas and Antakaran to accept one's authority. But if a king doesn't know how to rule, people will not obey his orders. Right? So if a Jeev were to attempt to rule the kingdom in the form of the body without understanding the art of ruling, then it will never become happy. So what is the art of ruling? Art of ruling is one should thoroughly realize the glory of God. One should conquer one's mind by meditating on God's form. One should conquer one's ears by listening to discourses related to God. One should not allow worldly talks to be heard by the ears. Skin should only be allowed to touch God and his devotees. Eyes should only be allowed to do the darshan of God. Tongue should only be forever sing the praises of God and taste only the prasad of God. Nose should only be allowed to smell fragrance of God, flowers, and objects consecrated by God. None of the indriyas should be allowed to follow the unrighteous path. Right. So that is the art of ruling. That is the art of ruling, of controlling the antahkaran, controlling the indriyas. Right. So personal endeavor is the greatest of all spiritual endeavors for attaining liberation. G2:13. Maharaj's nature. Maharaj's nature. And Maharaj is saying that he is not saying this out of pretense or self-conceit. He says that this message, if someone understands this, will tremendously benefit that person. It is based off of Maharaj's experience, what he has seen throughout his life and throughout his experience. And his state is that even if he wished to engross his mind, even if he wished to engross in mind all the charming sounds, all the charming touches, all the charming touches, smells, all the charming taste, all the charming sights, even if he wished to do that, he could not do so because he remains absolutely dejected towards them. All of the attractive Vishayas, all the repulsive Vishayas are literally the same to him. The king of beggars is the same to him, ruling through realms, begging for food, sitting with honor and insult, walking on foot, sitting with honor on an elephant. All are the same. Someone honors him, someone insults him, someone throws dirt on him. Everything is the same to God. And why is this? Because God has intense vairagya in his antahkaran. He is not burdened by it, just like a person who is not burdened by carrying a heavy rock. He is not burdened by this antahkaran. He forcefully engages his indriyas, vrittis towards objects, and they remain there very reluctantly, right? So if you throw a stone into the air, it goes as high as it can, but ultimately it falls down. If there is a weak bull, it can stand only as long as the man forcefully supports it, but ultimately, without that support, it slumps onto the ground. So imagine if a very strong man was able to crack a betel nut between their teeth, sucking after 10 or 20 very sour lemons, who will have very difficulty in chewing even roasted chana. So he only when he forcefully engages his vrittis in the vishays that they are able to become engaged in them. And why? So, right. So Maharaj has to forcefully engage his vrittis in the vishays that they are able to remain engaged with them. The analogy is if a strong man is able to crack betel nuts between their teeth, it would be very difficult to even chew roasted chana. So it's very difficult for Maharaj to even engage his vrittis on something. Right? And why is this? Because his vrittis are always constantly remaining inverted to his Hridayakash. And in that Hridayakash, he sees divine light. In that divine light, he sees the extremely luminous form of God. That form is dark. 2 arms, 2 legs, not 4, not 1,000, not 10,000, 2 arms, 2 legs, very captivating human-like teenager, all 4 sides by groups of muktas. See that form in his incarnate form before me at this very form. Before he even came into the satsang, before he even was in his mother, when he could see that form. Whoever realizes the form of God will never be drawn to the pleasures of the Vishays, no difficulty in subduing the desires of the Panch Vishays. That uniform divine light is referred to the Atma. Form of God within that light is called the essence of the Atma, Parabrahma, or Purushottam. Is that same God for the liberation of countless Jeeves manifests on the earth. Appears like a human being, but he's not. Appears like a human being, that is not. But whoever meditates on the human form of God, right, sees the luminous form, divine form of God seated in Akshalan. And such a person who meditates on that form traverses Maya, attains the highest state of enlightenment. And one who realizes this form does not harbor any affection for the Panch Vishays. And this Purushottam Narayan transcends Akshar, is the cause of all of the avatars. And sometimes when God assumes a human form, leaves the earth and returns to his abode like a human being, his physical body might remain on the earth. Rukmini took Sri Krishna's body onto his lap, with engulfed into the fire. Dashavdev's body was burnt in a raging forest fire, and leaving no remains behind. Right, but he sometimes may leave some remains behind. So his accordance of birth and death are not necessarily in accordance with the ways of the world. So when you realize God as such, no obstacles on the path to liberation. Right? But if any deficiency remains in understanding God, then one's flaw will never be eradicated, right? Even if there is a slight flaw in observance of some of the vows, that then there is nothing to worry about. But there is a flaw in understanding God, then one's flaw will never be eradicated, right? And this gnan, this knowledge is something that stays with someone, right? Even after this life, right? But he was reborn as a deer, he still retained the gnan from his previous life. This is the glory of such gnan, right? It is narrated by Narad, Sanakadik, Brahma, and other devs as well. And this concept, these discourses, nature of God, cannot be understood alone. It is only when the Satpurush manifests on the earth and one hears them narrated by him can one understand this concept and this nature of God. Right? There's no other obstacle-free path than that of having firm refuge in God. Realize that the form of God amidst the divine light is the Maharaj that is visible before you. Even if you can't do that, simply realize that Maharaj himself sees the form which is amidst the Aksharup light. Right? That this is the very essence of the Shastras, and he swears by all of the Paramahamsas that he has seen these facts within his lives. Faith in God and faith in Dharma. Faith in God and faith in Dharma. The first canto of the Srimad Bhagavad talks about that all forms of dharma are supported by the form of God. All forms of dharma are supported by the form of God, and that is why Bhagavan is called Dharma Dhurandhar. And dharma only takes refuge in the form of God. So all forms of dharma are supported by the form of God. Dharma only takes refuge in the form of God. That is why Bhagavan is called Dharma Dhurandhar. So when a person keeps faith in God's form, Bhagavan enters and resides into that person's heart. Dharma dwells in their heart, and therefore faith in dharma naturally develops in someone who has faith in God. So that is why, if one has resolute faith in God, faith in dharma will also remain firm as a consequence. Right? And now, if one observes the niyams described by God, then the desires of the Panch Vishays can be conquered. Right? The only means to conquer the desires for the Panch Vishays is to follow the niyams prescribed by God. In the same way that an ailing person can only be cured if they control their diet and complete their course of medication, right? Staying within the niyams and following those niyams is crucial. One who has strong Shraddha becomes enlightened very immediately. One who has feeble Shraddha may take many lives to culminate, to reach the culmination of their endeavors, spiritual endeavors. Person who has abundant Shraddha, even if they only recently became a Satsangi, they will still come great. Right? And what are the characteristics of people who have intense Shraddha? Well, if they were to engage in an activity related to God, they would do so very hastily, carrying out their bodily activities. One who has such Shraddha is able to immediately conquer all of their indriyas, right? And the indriyas are like the wind. Even though the wind cannot be seen, it can be inferred that the wind is blowing by, in which it shakes the tree. Similarly, the vrutis of the indriyas cannot be seen, but everyone realizes that they surge towards the vishays. Right? So that the only means to eradicate the acuteness of the indriyas is to force the indriyas to observe the niyams for renunciants and householders as prescribed by God. Now, weak Shraddha, how is weak Shraddha actually, how can it actually become stronger? It can actually become stronger if one understands the glory of God. So analogy is, one will never be attracted to earthen utensils used for drinking water, but if those utensils were actually made of gold, you actually understand the glory of gold, right? In the same way you understand the glory of God, then even if someone has weak Shraddha, will grow stronger. To G2 armies, consecration of Narayana, right? Brave soldiers, two kings have different types of soldiers. One are brave soldiers. They have absolutely no greedy motives. They are not afraid of dying. They have one goal and one goal only, to capture the opponent's flag and to ensure their own victory. The flag represents the abode of God. The brave soldiers represent the staunch devotees of God. The coward soldiers, they identify themselves with their body. They care about looting. They care about gaining the enemy's wealth. They care about their bodies, right? If our enemy wins, we shall loot our opponent's wealth and weapons. These are the devotees that identify themselves with the body. The brave devotees think we want to attain the abode of God within this very lifetime, no matter what happens. They do not become enticed along the way. They harbor no desires related to the world or to their body, right? When Maharaj went to Ahmedabad for the installation ceremony of Sri Narayan Dev, Right? Maharaj saw all these different memories and he wanted to forget all these different memories. He wanted to forget all these different people and activities that he saw. Then he went to Dholka, then he went to the forest of Ganesh Dholka and spent the night there. And he began to think so much, he forgot all about his body. He thought so much, he forgot all the different activities and he did so all the different thoughts. And after those rolling thoughts had subsided, he looked within. When he looked within, he saw all these different transcendental wonders and all the pleasures of the days. And his mind was not tempted a single bit. His mind was not tempted a single bit. And when his mind was not tempted a single bit, all of the devs started to praise him that you are an ekantic book of God. Your mind did not become tempted. And Maharaj told his man, I know your true form. So look, if you harbor a thought about any object other than God, I will crush you to pieces the same way. Told his buddhi, right? If you harbor any form resolve other than the form other than God, you will be in trouble. Told his chit, if you contemplate on anything other than God, I will also crush you to pieces. Told his antakaran, if you harbor any form of conceit except that of servitude towards God, I will destroy you to pieces. So man, buddhi, chit, ahamkar, four different things that Maharaj told his man, buddhi, chit, ahamkar. Narrated this entire experience only for the sake of the liberation of devotees. And only after Maharaj looked within and the devas praised him for not getting enticed, did he forget all the objects and the illness that had arisen as a result of those thoughts had also disappeared. And the dharma of an ekantic bhakt is as follows. One, the dharma of an ekantic bhakt is that they do not believe their body to be their own true form, right? And they believe themselves to be Chaitanya. They do the bhakti of God while observing dharma, gnana, and vairagya. They maintain no desire for any object other than God, and they become such a sadhu that there is no greater status than that of a sadhu. So queen's authority is the same that of a king. That sadhu is the same majesty as God, right? And they attain these transcendental powers and strength. They attain these transcendental powers and strength by the grace of God, right? So it's also the same thing as holding on to a chintamani, right? We hold on to a chintamani with great care because it allows us to get any object we desire. So devotee God should hold on to the chintamani in the form of God's form. At 228, G228, compassionate nature, a lifeline, talks all about the Vasudev Mahatmya places a great emphasis on dharma, gnan, vairagya, bhakti, as well as non-violence. And Maharaj says the Valmiki Ramayana and uh, Harivansh has placed a great emphasis on violence. Right, Raghunath Ji also behaved as the characteristics of a kshatriya. Right? Even if someone made the slightest mistake, he would abandon them immediately. Even the slightest mistake, even though Sitaji became subject to only minor public criticism, he renounced her immediately, even though she was very dear to him. So this is the emphasis on not being tolerant of even the slightest mistake. But Maharaj's nature says it is not like that. Arjun was very compassionate in nature. No man like Ramchandraji and Arjun, and no woman like Sitaji and Draupadi. So Maharaj has a compassionate nature, but a person spites devotees of God, then he develops an aversion towards that person. Even though Maharaj has such a compassionate nature, that is the degree to which this is such an incredible and powerful and not the right thing to do. Becomes extremely pleased with one who immediately serves devotees of God. If one is a genuine devotee of God, then Maharaj becomes a devotee of that devotee. Right, he is bhakti of such devotees of God. Right, those who progress only do so by serving devotees of God. Those who regress only do so by spiting devotees of God. The only method for a person to please God is to serve devotees of God by thought, word, and deed. Only method to please for a person to please God is to serve devotees of God by thought, word, deed. Only method to displease God is to spite devotees of God. And one should only do the which that pleases God. Right, that is the essence of the shastras. That also one should only do that which pleases God. Right? And one should only think that I desire to only serve devotees in this life and all subsequent lives. Right? And Maharaj has this is the message, this is the most profound and fundamental message, essence of all essences, and he's extracted this essence from the Vedas, Shastras, and Purans, and all other words relating to liberation. G233, vow of non-lust, vow of non-lust. Maharaj has insistently offered the Panchvishaks without actually wishing for them. But he swears by all of the lives of the Paramahansa that to this day he has never harbored an improper thought about women or wealth, either in the waking state or in the dream state. He's eternally flawless. And one who perceives flaws in Maharaj, right, in me will suffer from vicious thoughts, both in the waking and dream state. Only the contemplation of God remains within heart, and he outwardly meets and mingles with the devotees of God is only for the benefit of their jeev, right? So that is Maharaj's inclination. That is Maharaj's personal inclination. If a person firmly observes vow of not lust, then they're never far from God, right? And he, oh yes, he has stayed here because of these devotees' firm resolve to observe the vow of non-lust. And only because this Muji Brahmachari is extremely staunch in his observance of non-lust is he very much like his service, right? That is why Maharaj has instructed all the senior Brahmansas and senior women that if any male or female devotee in the satsang fellowship commits a breach in his or her observance of the vow of non-lust, then please do not inform me of it because it deeply saddened, feels like abandoning the satsang and leaving. Right? Three components, bullock cart to actually cultivate this vow of non-lust: driver, pair of bullocks, wheel, yoke, right? Supporting assembly. There are three components that make up the bullock cart. So there are three ways to establish the vow of non-lust: conquering the mind, contemplating in one's mind that I am the Atma, not the body. Mind should constantly engage in the nine types of bhaktis, listening to the spiritual discourses of God. If man conquers the ghost but does not assign it some work to do, ghost turns into the man himself. Same way mind is a ghost. If it is not engaged in the bhakti of God, it begins to conceive these evil thoughts. So mind should constantly engage in the nine types of bhakti. Second is to keep the prans under control. Diet and activity should be regulated, not strong yearning for food. And the third component is to control one's body by physically keeping it within the niyams prescribed in the satsang. So three ways. First way is to keep the mind occupied in the nine types of bhakti. The second way is to keep the prans under control, not having a strong yearning for food. Third way is to control one's body by physically keeping it within the niyams prescribed in satsang for each individual. And that which is impossible to achieve what is impossible to achieve, nothing is impossible to achieve. That which is practiced regularly can definitely be achieved. For example, the daily drawing of water from a well, the constant rubbing of even a soft rope can cause a groove in the very hard piece of rock that lives in the edge of that rock. Similarly, for a sadhuan who continuously persists in the effort for eradicating a swabhav, how long can those swabhavs actually remain? They will certainly be destroyed. So persistent effort, right, can even cause a groove in even the hard piece of rock. Right, if you were to daily drawing of the water from the well, the constant rubbing of even a soft rope can cause a groove in that very hard piece of rock. Split in the Prithvi, G247, split in the Prithvi down to Patad. Right? If a sant is very eager to attain liberation, he would become increasingly overjoyed when Maharaj does something that may upset him or denounce the Vishesh. For example, Muktanand Swami contracted TB, tuberculosis. Right, so restricted from eating all these different foods. A wild person would think this has restricted all tasty foods and drinks, and thus wonder if I actually have attained the company of a great sadhu in the disguise of tuberculosis. That is how a wise person would view that situation. Right, but if a person is staying with a senior sadhu due to the temptation of obtaining tasty food or drink, or to the temptation of obtaining nice clothes, or to the temptation of collecting objects of life, he is not considered to be a sadhu at all, right? Considered to be like an extremely wretched person, like a dog. Right? Ultimately fall from something. But if it's someone who gives a sadhu a nice object, one who becomes jealous and who is greedy for the punishment, are both much worse than someone who has committed the 5 grave sins. Right? As if the earth has been split down to patar and we begin to fill it with water, it will never be filled. Similarly, the Indriyas will never become satisfied by the Vishays, and they never will. One can eradicate one's attachment to the Vishays, right, by considering the virtues of the sadhu and who speaks to one harshly, and one should not think ill of him. Right? Eradicate one's attachment to the Vishays, right? And one should consider virtues of a sadhu who speaks to one harshly, not think ill of him. Right? And head first into the gutter. Even if someone falls head first into the gutter, one should take a bath and become pure again. One should not remain in the filth. Right? So if someone harbors pure desires and as a result attains Brahmalok or Indriyalok, they should think I have fallen head first into the gutter and discard all of the pleasures, right? And then make their way to the abode of God. They should resolve and not stop anywhere in between. Muji Brahmachari realizes my glory and serves me. In the same way, I realize his greatness. In the same way, people should realize the greatness of householders and renunciants, right? Because they serve us. In the same, just as householders, renunciants serve us, we should realize their greatness. In the same way, we should also foster fraternity among devotees of God by realizing each other's greatness. Characteristics of one, G251, characteristics of one who behaves as the Atma. So when does the Atma is when is it restless? When is it restless? It is due to the increase of the force of Rajagun. Even during deep sleep, when the disturbance of Rajagun joins with Tamagun, right, one experiences a feeling of restlessness, even within deep sleep. So as long as when the influence of the goods remain within a person, they will never experience happiness. Only when they behave as the Atma do they become happy. Right? When the eight factors of place, time, action, company, mantra, shastra, and initiation, meditation become unfavorable, adverse influence causes great distress even in the hearts of Shiv and Brahma. So no matter how nirgun one may be, or even if one behaves as the Atma, if one encounters adverse circumstances, one will certainly experience distress. Within, one can never be happy by bridging the disciplines laid by the great Purush. So that is why all renunciants should abide by the dharma of renunciants. Householders should abide by the dharma of householders. Women should abide by the dharma of women. Woman will not become happy even if one behaves less than what is prescribed, nor will one become happy by doing what is beyond what is prescribed. Right? So if one observes too much or too little, certainly become unhappy. The one who follows the commands of the Satpurus can be said to be under the influence of favorable some circumstances. Therefore, only one who follows the commands of the Satpurus is behaving as the Atma. A Goldsmith Workshop, G255, a Goldsmith Workshop. Maharaj explains that even when he was a child, he enjoyed many things, such as going to the mandir for darshan, listening to spiritual discourses, keeping the company of sadhus, and going on pilgrimages. Maharaj enjoyed that. But when he renounced his home, he did not even like to keep his clothes. He liked only to stay only in the forest, but he was not the least bit of afraid. Even when he came across many different large snakes, lions, elephants, countless other types of animals, he was not had no fear whatsoever. He always remained fearless. Later, when he was traveling to other different places of pilgrimage, he met Ramanand Swami. Only after Ramanand Swami passed away did he keep only a little bit of fear. And that too, that was for the sake of satsang. And Ki Maharaj constantly regards each and every single worldly object to be perishable and insignificant. In the same way that all work, in the same way that armpit hairs are the same, right? You don't consider which one is good or bad. All worldly objects appear the same to Maharaj. Even if when he does compliment or criticize something, it is only to please the devotees of God. It is only for the sake of devotees of God. The mind of an Ekating Bhakt, right now, not the dharma, but the mind of an Ekating Bhakt only contemplates upon the form of God. Their mouth only sings the praise of God. Hands only engage in the service of God and their devotees, and ears only listen to the praises of God. That is why Maharaj is able to perform all of his activities only after realizing them to be a form of bhakti to God. Besides the bhakti of God, his mind is indifferent to everything. Right, so it's only son of a king dies when the king reaches the age of 60 or 70. King would become disinterested in all things. So consider the analogy of a goldsmith workshop. Right, the goldsmith workshop to be the heart, and goldsmith is the Maya, the Indriyas and Antakarans to be the wife and the children of the Maya, which is the goldsmith. Right, the goldsmith is the Maya, and they sometimes mix in silver. Guns, attachment to the Panchvishays, believe that one is the body. They mix in silver with the gold. So when some gold is extracted, some silver is mixed in. The original gold diminishes in purity to become the 18 carats gold. Only when it's melted down again can it be purified again. Okay, so thus the silver in the form of Rajagun, Tamagun, and other impurities have been mixed into the Jeev in the same way that the wife and the children of the Maya mix in silver, right? Extract some gold, mix in silver, right? Rajagun, Tamagun gets mixed into the Jeev. The pure Atma, right, remains. The pure Atma remains. And no other impurities of Maya will be left. That can only happen when the silver in the form of Rajagun, Tamagun, and other impurities are filtered out. G259, ultimate liberation. G259, ultimate liberation. One central principle is that only God and His Son can grant liberation. Only those who have performed a great number of merits from performing God's good deeds receive the opportunity to serve God's Son. Those who have few merits do not. Therefore, one should develop affection for God's Son just as one has affection for one's wife, son, parents, or brother. Even if one's wife, son, or other family members are unworthy, even if they are immoral and vile, and in no other way they would perceive flaws in them. Right? In the same way, if the bhakt of God possesses every noble virtue, if you were to utter even a few harsh words, then one would hold a grudge against him. Right? They would not attain liberation. Right? Some people think that will I attain liberation or not? That's what some people think. What can be the reason of this? Well, in their past lives, Like they have not attained the God or the Son. So this is a new experience for them. But how do you know if someone has attained God and the Son to have served them in their previous lives? Well, such a person, even if there were disturbing thoughts related to lust, anger, or greed, or persisted, their faith in God would not dissolve. Even if their own mind were to try to sway them from their faith, they would not be swayed. Such a person's resolve can be said to be like Nath Bhagat Vishnudas Himraj state. G261, Niyams, faith in God and loyalty. Three attributes of staunch devotee. First, strictly adhere to the niyams prescribed by one's Ishtadev, that one does not even forsake those disciplines, even at the cost of one life. Second is to have extremely firm faith in God. Third is to be loyal to those Vaishnava devotees who worship one's Ishtadev. One who possesses these three attributes completely can be said to be a staunch devotee of renunciant, who, despite encountering wealth and women in his travels to other regions, remains unaffected and continues to firmly adhere to all his niyams, is considered to be great among all renunciants. And if there was a sensuous person considered to be reputable in society comes to an assembly, and they should be respected in that assembly and given a seat at the very front of the assembly. Such etiquette should be performed. Right? Consider the example of when King Parikshit went to the Rishi's hermitage, and the Rishi appeared to be in Samadhi. So the king was not honored. So the king became angry, threw a dead snake around the Rishi's neck. So the Rishi's son cursed him, which led to the king's death. Right? Daksh Prajapati visited Brahma's assembly. Shivji neither stood for Daksh Prajapati nor welcomed it. This upset Daksh, and so he canceled Shiv's share in the yagna that he performed. Right? And because of that sin, Sati burned to death in Daksh's yagna. This prompted Veerbhadra to cut off Daksha's head and offer it in the fire, which resulted in Daksh receiving the head of a goat. Therefore, those who are considered to be respectable in society and worldly affairs should in no way be insulted in an assembly, and they should be respected. Gaining strength, G263, gaining strength. Once Jiva has become extremely powerful, then the vruttis of one's antakaran are in fact the vruttis of one's Jiva. Once Jiva has become very powerful, one would not even have impure dreams. If one's Jiva is lacking in strength, one should follow the principle of Sankhya, behave only as the Atma, but one should not associate with the Indriya. So behaving as the Atma, one Jiva gains strength. But there is even a greater method than this. And that greater method is if a person has love for God and the Son, possesses intent Shraddha in serving them, and also engages in the 9 types of bhakti, then their Jiva instantly gains strength. Thus, for making the Jiva stronger, there is no method comparable to serving God and His Son. This is gaining strength of the Jiva. And then Maharaj tells a personal story that when he became ill in 1869, he saw Kailas Vaikunt, also saw himself riding on Nandeshwar and Garud, but he did not find any pleasure. Only when he started behaving as the Atma, all of those disturbances subsided. And he realized that much better than behaving as the Atma is to stay within the fellowship of God and His devotees. That is, to stay within the fellowship of God and His devotees and to be able to serve them in whichever way possible is indeed the very best spiritual endeavor. When one has darshan of God and His Son, all those miseries are expelled. And bhakti of God is indeed nothing but a form of Brahma. That is why one should never perceive human traits in him. Thus, there is no merit greater than that of serving devotees of God, and there is no sin greater than that of spiting devotees of God. Therefore, if one wishes to make one Jiva powerful, one should sincerely serve God and His devotees by thought, word, and deed.